Welcome, and greetings to all. I am Shenlong Pen Dragon, a lore master. So, as always, before we begin, a quick disclaimer. The following is a non-profit video. I do not own the images or the story in this video. The credit for these belong to their original sources. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, before we start, please allow me to apologize for the delay in this video. I've had a lot going on, especially at work recently, and I've had very little time for anything else. I'm sure many of you can attest to such things, and as we say, life happens. Anyway, without further ado, let us continue. So today I want to start a new 5-part series on the Catholic military orders, also known as militant orders. You may have heard them also referred to as religious societies, or sometimes a knights or knightly order, but this is really a more modern term. So I want to cover exactly who they were, what their involvements in the Middle Ages were, and their ultimate downfalls, if assuming they had any. So without further delaying, ladies and gentlemen, let us continue. So, ladies and gentlemen, you may be curious as to the differences between a Knight of the Realm and a Knight from a militant order. So, a Knight of the Realm is primarily employed in the service of his homeland, the kingdom he's from, or his king specifically, or even his local lord. It was actually quite common that when called to battle, a lord had to supply a number of knights or men-at-arms to fight in his king's army. The militant orders, however, were loyal specifically to the order and to the Pope. They could not be commanded by any one king or lord. They were formed primarily in the Middle Ages in association with the Crusades, which saw military campaigns being conducted in the Holy Land, the Baltics, and the Iberian Peninsula. During these conflicts, their mission was to protect Christian interests in Europe and the Middle East, provide protection for pilgrims and Christian populations, and to safeguard or recover any holy relics the Church deemed important, such as the True Cross, shown here in this image taken from the movie The Kingdom of Heaven. The militant orders would eventually go on to be known as the Chevalier orders, after the French term chevalier, which comes from an earlier Roman term, which typically means a mounted soldier. Typically, the bulk of the members of militant orders were known as laymen. These are essentially members which are not of the clergy, so they've not been ordained as ministers or priests. However, these laymen still took religious vows for things such as poverty, chastity, and obedience. In the beginning, there were 5 militant orders: the Knights Hospitalier, the Order of St. James, the Order of Calatrava, and the Teutonic Knights, and finally, the Knights Templar, arguably the most famous and infamous of them all. In today's video, we will specifically be talking about the Knights Templar. So, the Knights Templars, also known as the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ, or Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, are probably the most easily recognized of the original 5 militant orders. They are certainly the most well known of the 5, most famous for wearing their white mantles with the red cross. And like all mounted knights, the role they took in battle was primarily as shock troopers. Now, yes, there is a lot of inspiration that comes from the Templars, such as the Black Templars in Warhammer, and the Templar Order from the Dragon Age series. And yes, there's also a lot of conspiracy surrounding them, especially with their wealth and the Holy Grail. Now, while I will touch on the connection with the Holy Grail and go into a little bit to do with the Templar finances in this video, I'm not going to cover any conspiracy theories. So if that's why you're here, I do apologize, but no, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm not going to be covering any of those. I'm only going to be sticking to the facts that are known. So the order itself was first formed in it was first formed in 1119, and their HQ was established at Temple Mount in Jerusalem. They were eventually officially endorsed by the Roman Catholic Church by degrees such as Papal Bull Omedatum Optimum by Pope Innocent II. After this, the Templars eventually became what's known as a favoured charity, which allowed them to rapidly grow in power, wealth, and members. Something that may in fact surprise you is that only 10% of the order were combatants, whereas the rest was primarily involved in finances and charity. The Templars are renowned for setting up a very large economic infrastructure throughout Christendom, essentially Christian Europe, and developing innovative financial techniques, which is actually akin to an early form of banking, and they formed one of the world's earliest multinational corporations. So, ladies and gentlemen, now that the very quick background on the Templars is done, I'm now going to go into their story properly. The city of Jerusalem has particular importance and interest to not only Christians, but also the people of Islam and Judaism. The city was often a source of conflict for all three. However, in 1099, Franks of the First Crusade achieved their goal in taking the city and established the Kingdom of Jerusalem. This in their mind was a great victory, and they believed it was God giving them the right to rule in this land, having taken the city in His name and the name of their Lord Jesus Christ. When news of their victory spread back to Europe, great joy was brought to Christendom, and pilgrims from all over began to travel to the city. However, the journey was not safe, and these pilgrims would often find themselves attacked on the road. Unwilling to stand for this, Sir Hugh de Payens of the Kingdom of France, in 1119, proposed to the King of Jerusalem at the time, Baldwin II, and his councillor, Warmond, the Patriarch of Jerusalem, that a new Catholic monastic religious order should be established in order to protect the pilgrims. Both men agreed, and 9 founding knights established the Knights Templar in Jerusalem at Temple Mount, shown in this image here. And it's from this their HQ where we get the term the Knights Templar, for this temple was once the Temple of Solomon. And it was supposedly here, at this temple, where they found a number of underground vaults, and in one such vault contained their greatest treasure, the Holy Grail. Now, I did tell you I would touch on the Holy Grail, which is what I will do now. As I said, the Holy Grail was considered to be the Knights Templar's greatest treasure, and the Pope charged them specifically with the task of protecting it. Now, I am going to have to tell you here, ladies and gentlemen, this is a myth. There is no actual evidence that the Knights Templar found the Grail under the Temple of Solomon, nor is there actually any hard evidence that such an artifact ever existed in the first place. I personally don't believe the Grail ever existed, but that's my own opinion. Please take from that as you will. However, the story of the Grail and its connection to the Knights Templar is such a big part of their modern day myth and legend that I felt it would be unjust to not at least touch on it or mention it in any way, shape or form. If you would like to know more about the Grail, I did do a video on Sir Galahad and his quest for the Grail. I recommend you go and see that video if you'd like to learn more. So, ladies and gentlemen, we see here two symbols associated with the Knights Templar, uh, which are in fact still associated with them today. One being the two men and one horse, and the other being the temple itself, which is a fairly obvious connection. The two men riding on one horse is a little harder to understand, and this actually comes from the fact that when the order was first established, they were pretty broke. In fact, they barely had any coppers to their name whatsoever. But that didn't stop them, however. It is worth noting that for terms of later, you could interpret this as a connection to the fact that the Templars took vows of poverty, but the truth is it is connected to the fact that they were poor when they were first formed, hence where we get the term poor fellow soldiers of Christ and the Temple of Solomon. However, their money troubles did not last, and they were quickly able to secure an endorsement from the church from the help of the nephew of Andre de Montward, who was one of the founding members, and his nephew was in fact Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, who had several connections quite high up in the church. With his help, they were able to secure an endorsement and take care of their money troubles. In 1139, Pope Innocent II gave the Templars an immunity from local laws, the right to pass by all borders freely, and an exemption from taxes except those that were owed to the Church and the Pope himself. Now, as you can imagine, the kings of Europe were not particularly happy about this, and it started to garner a fair bit of resentment towards the Templars. So this is a painting of Pope Innocent II, and I wanted to note that the details of the immunities granted to the Templars is documented in the Papal Bull Omedatum Optimum, and it is indeed signed by Pope Innocent II at the bottom of the document. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find an image of the document itself. It's quite possible that that document actually doesn't exist anymore due to its age. Now, as intricate as the Templars' financial empire was, they were primarily still a military order, and as such they were expected to take part in battles, and they did indeed take part in many battles. One such was the Battle of Montgisard, shown here in this image. In the Iberian Peninsula, both the Templars and the Knight Hospitalier came into conflict with the Moorish Almohad Empire. During this time, the Templars were able to take strongholds in Castile and Leon, as well as take possessions of the Order of Montjoy, which, as far as I know, was subsumed into the Templars and no longer exists to this day. The Templars themselves also established the castle of Tumlar, which was attacked by the Almohad, but this attack failed, and the Templars were able to hold on to it for an extended period of time. So, to give a sense of scale of the conflict in the Iberian Peninsula, I've included this map here of the Almohad Empire at its peak. So, as we can see, that when the empire was at its strongest, it controlled a good chunk of North Africa, extended into southern and Spain and Portugal, and then it went up the west side of Spain. Now, it's worth pointing here that Spain at the time was not a unified country, it was still separated into multiple different kingdoms. I have touched a little bit on the Spanish-Moorish conflict before when I did the Battle of Teba. Please do go and watch that video. I include the photographs of the castle at Teba, taken actually by myself, which was the primary target objective of the Spanish army. And in fact, during that battle, a contingent of Scottish soldiers, led in fact by my own ancestor, took part in the battle, fighting on behalf of the Spanish. I find that battle to be of particular interest, not only for me for the family connection, but also the actual whole Moorish-Spanish conflict is quite an interesting series of military campaigns. So I do hope you go and look and enjoy that video. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, that's a big enough tangent, so we'll move swiftly on. So as I stated earlier, Tomar Castle became a particularly important stronghold for the Templars in the Iberian Peninsula, and this became the source of an important battle site between the Templars and the Almohad Empire. However, as I did state earlier, the attack did fail. This is just to show you Tomar Castle itself. We can see it's got nice high walls, good turrets. However, it is surrounded by foliage in this image. That probably is less likely to have been what it would have been like during the Templars' time. They would have been more likely to clear the ground to give themselves a good bit more uh, view, shall we say, and make it far harder to be sneaked up on. But yeah, I just wanted to include an image of the castle just so that we could see exactly what Tomar Castle looked like. So, as I'm sure we all know, the great Saracen leader Salah would lead his warriors on a campaign to retake the Holy Land for his own people. His warriors were successful in taking the city of Jerusalem, and in 1291 they launched a successful siege of the city of Acca. As a result, the Templars lost the last of their strongholds in the Holy Land and had no choice but to withdraw. They relocated their HQ to Limassol in Cyprus, with the garrison maintained on the island of Arwad, which is off the coast of Tortosa in modern-day Syria. 9 years later, the Templars saw a chance to retake a foothold in the Holy Land. The Mongols, under the leadership of their great Khan, Genghis, had rode into the Middle East. Genghis had previously sent emissaries into the Middle East, actually not looking for conflict, but potentially to invite trade, but his efforts had been in vain, and the sultans had wronged him by sending him back the heads of his messengers. Such an insult would not stand, and the great Khan led his Tumans west in a massive campaign, recalling all his warriors from their previous campaigns for this one attack. The relentless assault saw the sacking of the city of Samarkand, and casualties on both sides were heavy when the sultans attempted to stop him. Seeing an opportunity here, the Templars joined the Mongols in coordinated military attacks in 1300. However, the Templars' efforts were pretty much in vain, for Arwad Island was in fact lost to the Egyptian Mamluk Sultanate in 1302 and 1303. As a result, the Templars were once again left to withdraw. With the Holy Land now lost, the Knights Templars were now left without a clear mission directive and a large standing army. This only caused tensions in the European kingdoms to grow, especially considering the Templars' growing financial gains and businesses, along with their desire to form their own monastic state, just as the Teutonic Knights had done in Prussia and the Baltics, and the Hospitallers in Rhodes. In order to combat this, Pope Clement V, shown in this image here, in 1305, arrived in Avignon, France, and suggested merging the Templars and the Hospitallers. Both orders refused outright, but the Pope was not to be dissuaded so easily. Wanting to discuss the matter further, Clement V invited both de Molay, Grand Master of the Knights Templar, and de Vivarais, Grand Master of the Knights Hospitalier, to join him in Avignon. De Molay arrived first, however, de Vivarais was delayed for months, and as a result, never arrived. While waiting for his counterpart to arrive, the Mole and the Pope discussed the criminal charges that had been levied against an ousted Templar 2 years prior. During this time, Clement decided it would be a good idea to include his relative, King Philip IV of France, in the investigation. Many historians argue that at this time, Philip, King of France, was heavily in debt to the Templars, after borrowing large sums of money from them in order to finance his wars with England. Unwilling to pay back the money and wanting to alleviate the debt somehow, Philip saw this as his best chance to just remove the problem at the root. Taking the investigation into this ousted Templar, King Philip decided it would be a good idea to order the arrest of all Templars in France. This occurred on Friday the 13th of October, 1307. Now, Philip couldn't just go around arresting Templars willy-nilly, as much as he would have wanted to. He still needed the Pope's permission, as the Templars were still a Catholic militant order, and as such, he had no power over them. So the King of France leant on the Pope, and got him to fold pretty quickly and pretty easily. The general idea as to the method that Philip used was to threaten military action against Clement, but it's quite likely that he may have made him other promises as well, such as riches. So having got what he wanted, Philip was now able to make the arrests. He typically accused the Templars of being heretics, arresting them on charges such as idol worship, homosexual acts, which were considered to be illegal at the time, denying Christ, and splitting the cross during their initiation. Other non-heretical charges he levied against the Templars included financial corruption, fraud, and financial secrecy. Despite the fact that there was a significant lack of evidence for any of the charges levied against the Templars, many of the brethren were forced to confess under torture, and during the confession they were forced to deny the fact that they had been tortured. King Philip then thought it would be a great idea to be able to seize the assets of the Templars, and such he leaned on Pope Clement again, and once again the Pope folded very quickly to the king's demands, giving him the right to seize the assets of the Templars he arrested. This right was very quickly extended to the rest of the kings of Europe, and we started to see a lot of Templars being arrested under charges of heresy and financial corruption in order to seize their assets. Growing defiant and angry, De Mole and one of his knights, de Charnay, retracted their confessions, pleading their innocence and claiming they had only confessed under torture. But King Philip would have none of it. He forced the trials to a guilty verdict, and on March 18th, 1314, both men were sentenced to death by burning at the stake. Remaining defiant to the last, De Mole requested that he be tied facing Notre Dame, and in his last moments he prayed. The translation of his last words are recorded as, "God knows who is wrong and has sinned. Soon a calamity will occur to those who have condemned us to death." 1 month later, Pope Clement V died, with Philip dying later that year during a hunting accident. Throughout the rest of Europe, many of his fellow kings decided to follow Philip's lead and arrest the Templars in order to seize their assets. However, due to a lack of evidence, there was few convictions, but the order was still finished. Many of its members were absorbed into other orders, and the Pope ordered the transfer of the Templars' remaining properties to the Hospitallers. However, King Denis I of Portugal, shown in this image, refused to take part, and in fact offered protection to Templars in his lands. Over time, the Templars in Portugal changed their name to the Order of Christ and its parallel, the Supreme Order of Christ and the Holy See. The cross of this order, or rather both orders, is shown here. In September 2001, a document known as the Seal on Parchment was discovered in the Vatican archives. It was dated to the 17th to the 20th August 1308 and records the trials of the Templars. It states that Pope Clement V absolved the Templars of their sins before the order had been disbanded in 1312. A second document addressed to Philip, dated to the 20th of August 1308, confirms this. The current stance of the Roman Catholic Church is that the Templars were in fact innocent, and that Pope Clement had been forced to act under the influence of King Philip of France and the earlier public scandals. And so for now, our story ends for the Templars. If requested, or if I find the time, I may revisit the Templars and focus on some of their early banking systems and financial infrastructure, as well as potentially the way that the order was structured, such as their ranking systems. I could also go into some of the battles that they participated in significantly greater detail, rather than just, as I did here, mentioning one or two and then leaving them. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. I do hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, then please remember to like and subscribe for more lore, myths, legends, and stories. I am Shen Longpen Dragon. Until next time, knowledge is power.